If you're a casual retro gamer like me, you probably spend most of your time playing level 1 of your favourite games. Getting to levels 2, 3 and beyond is practically impossible without spending hours and hours mastering the game. But with emulation, there is an easy way to unlock all that fantastic content that only the very best players can get to. So, let me show you how. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. One of the great features of using emulation for your retro gaming is that you have instant access to thousands and thousands of great games. Almost every game you've ever come across and thousands you've never heard of are all waiting for you to play them. So from all of this choice, you will inevitably find a few favourites. These are the games that you will come back and play on a regular basis. But if, like me, you're just an occasional retro gamer, it's very easy to end up playing level 1 over and over again every time you start up the game. You never quite have the time to master the title. And you know that there are some fantastic game screens that you could get to, but you just can't afford to spend the endless hours honing your skills to get there. So this is where emulation has a big advantage over the original hardware. When we owned and played these retro consoles, generally you only had a few games, so you'd naturally be playing each game enough to get good at it, and that was really the only way of progressing. Now, emulators work by building a complete gaming console inside software. So everything that the console does and everything that is needed to run the console is modelled using data inside the emulation software. Now, this allows the emulator to take complete control over every aspect of that game console. It can pause the console, it can make the console run at half speed, or you can even rewind the gameplay that you've just been playing. But the best feature for helping you get deeper levels of the game is the save state feature. So as the emulator models the game console, the processor, memory, support chips, controller interface and everything else in software, it's able to package all of this modeled data into a file which takes a snapshot of the complete state of that gaming console at a particular point in time. It can then save this file to your hard disk and then reload it at a later time to take the software emulated game console straight back to the exact point when you click that save state button. So the upshot of this is that you can save any game at any point and then return to that point any time you want. So by saving state after you've completed a certain section of your game, you create a new starting point that you can return to rather than having to go right back to the very start of the game. So by creating multiple save points, you can even bookmark particular points in a game. For example, you might bookmark the start of each level, so when you next play the game, you can actually pick your favourite level without having to play through the rest of the game to get there. Now, if you've been following some of my tutorials on how to set up emulation on your computers or mobile devices, you'll know that Retroarch covers most of the emulation we need. So Retroarch simply allows you to run a whole range of different emulation packages from within a single emulation application. So once we know how to use snapshots in Retroarch, we'll be able to create save points in most of our computer and console emulators. Now, to begin with, we need to make sure that we've got hotkeys set up to allow us to take control in the making and loading of these save state files. So if you start Retroarch as a standalone application, now if you've installed it using Launchbox or some other front-end package, you'll need to navigate to the installation folder and start Retroarch from there. Or if you're not able to start Retroarch by itself, then if you start playing a game, and usually the F1 key on your keyboard, that will take you into the Retroarch menu system. Now once you've got into the menu system, you need to go to the settings screen and then select the input section. This section allows you to set up all of your controllers and input devices, but it also lets you set up the hotkeys that we use to access the Retroarch features. So scroll down until you find the hotkey section and then click on that one. In the hotkeys section, you'll find a complete list of all the Retroarch features and the buttons you need to use to access them. So if you've never used any of these features, such as the slow motion or rewind, then do have a bit of a play. They are great fun to play around with and can be really helpful when you get to tricky stages in any game. Now for this tutorial, we're going to need to set the menu access button and the save state control buttons. So as you scroll down the list of hotkeys, you should find the load state and save state hotkey definitions. And these are usually set to F4 and F2 respectively. But if they aren't on your system, then simply make a note of which keys you're going to need to use. Now as you scroll down a bit further, you'll come to the save state slot increment and decrement hotkeys. Now Retroarch allows you to create numbered saved states for each game. So using the F7 and F6 keys, as shown here in my setup, I can select the slot that both my save current state and then reload state from is going to be using. So in this way I could basically create a save state slot at the start of level 2 and then save it into slot 2. Then I could play until I get to level 3 and then save my state into slot 3 and so on. But now the important thing to remember with these save slots is that you must select the correct slot before you hit the save state button. If you set the active slot to slot 2 so that you can start again at the beginning of level 2, then you play the level and then just hit the save state button, you'll actually overwrite your slot 2 save point with the level 3 starting point, so you'll lose that ability to go back to level 2. So do be careful as you're using this. So again, this is most important then if you're using save states as a way of bookmarking positions for later. So as I say, just be careful that you don't overwrite your bookmarks. Now the last button that we need to set up is the menu button. So if you continue scrolling down the hotkey definitions, you'll eventually get to the menu toggle hotkey. And as you can see here, by default that is set to F1. So basically when we're playing a game, if we press F1, we will get into this menu system. So now that we know which keys we need to use to access the save state feature, we can jump into the game and start getting into those higher levels. So for this demonstration, I'm using Ghosts and Ghouls on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, my method for progressing in games is to try and keep all of my lives intact. So each time I die, I load a save state to get me back to my starting point, rather than losing the life and letting the game take me back to the start of that particular level by itself. Now this means that I actually create a save state at the very beginning of the game. That way, if I get killed while I'm going through level 1, I can actually jump back to the start of level 1 with all of my lives intact, so that when I eventually do complete it and then get to the beginning of level 2, I can create a save state there which has all of my lives all ready for me to use. So now, I can just play my game, save my state as I get to a new level, take a break, or put the game down for a couple of days, and the next time I come back, I can just pick up from exactly where I left off. So in this way, you too will be able to get all the way through a game and actually get to play those levels that you'd never reach by simply playing the game as normal. Now, I've found this a fantastic feature, as there were some games I owned on original computers and consoles that even after playing for many months, I was never really able to get past the first few levels before I ran out of lives and had to go back to the very start again. So this technique actually lets me experience all of those levels that I'd only ever heard about but never been able to actually play. So you might ask if, is this actually cheating? Well, of course it is. If you ever want to enter a gaming competition or post up your game speedrun, you'll obviously be disqualified or worse for using save states. But we're not trying to prove how good we are at any particular game, we're just trying to experience the full depths of the software. And of course, someone has put a lot of effort into coding this for only a very few people to play those last few levels. So, Retroarch of course covers the vast majority of emulators, but there are times when you want to use a standalone emulator for a particular system. Now, I tend to use standalone emulators for my home computer gaming, as I find it makes it a bit easier to set up the hardware and interface just the way I want it. So almost all emulators have some sort of save state feature, which works in pretty much the same way as the Retroarch one. For example, I use the standalone version of Fuse for my ZX Spectrum emulation. So in a game like Manic Miner, I'd only ever be able to get to about level 2 or 3 before losing all of my 3 lives. So in the emulator, if I go to the File menu, I can see in there that there is a Save Snapshot option which uses the F2 button as its hotkey. So save states and save snapshots are the same sort of idea. So if I start playing Manic Miner, I can play through level 1 and then hit the F2 button to take a snapshot. Now in Fuse, this will bring up a file dialog which will save this snapshot file. So I simply need to name the file and then save it somewhere sensible. Now, when I get killed during level 2, I can simply reload my snapshot by either going to the File menu and selecting Open, or by using the F3 key as shown in the menu. And this will bring me up my file dialog again, where I can then select my previously saved snapshot and then retry level 2 with my full set of lives. Now Manic Miner is one of my favourite ZX Spectrum games, and I've played through it and creating snapshots at the start of each of the levels. And this means that I can simply go back in again at any point and then replay my favourite sections at will. Now arcade gaming is another of my favourite areas, and for this I use MAME. Now again, if you've been using my Launchbox tutorials, you'll have seen how easy it is to get MAME up and running with a full set of arcade games. But even in Launchbox, MAME does run as a standalone emulator, and that's outside of Retroarch, so it handles save states in a slightly different way. Now once you start a game in MAME, you can get to the in-game menu by pressing the Tab key. If you then select the Input General section, followed by User Controls, you should get a full list of the hotkeys for the various features inside MAME. Now again, there is a whole range of things that you can do in here to make your gameplay even more enjoyable, but the controls that we're looking for are for the Save State and Load State hotkeys further down in the menu. Now by default, as you can see here, these are set to the Shift F7 to save the state, and then just F7 by itself to load a state back in. So if we go back into our game and press Shift F7, we'll get the Save State menu popping up. Now this shows a list of previous save states for this game, which we can either overwrite, or we can simply press a button on our controller or on our keyboard to mark this new saved version. So basically, we're creating a saved state file and we're identifying it by a single button press either on our keyboard or on our controller. So when we want to reload our state, we simply have to hit the F7 key and the load state menu will appear. Now again, you'll see a list of the previous saved states which you can select, or you can simply press the hotkey that relates to the saved state that you want to load. So here I'm trying to make my way through one of my favourite shoot 'em up games, which is R-Type. Now as soon as I get to the level 1 boss, I'm going to create a saved state. So after I've pressed Shift F7, I then press the number 1 key, and that saves my progress. So I can now go in and try and beat this level 1 boss, and inevitably I'm going to get killed. So I can just simply then press the F7 key, followed by the 1 key, and that will take me straight back to the start of the boss, and I can have another go, again with all of my lives still intact. So that's it for save states and snapshots in your retro gaming emulators. I personally find it's a fantastic way to experience parts of games that I would never normally be able to get to. all of that code the game designers created and that most people never get to see is now well within your reach. So, I hope you find this feature as much fun as I have, and I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Do make sure you click that subscribe button and like this video to make sure you get access to all my upcoming tutorials and videos on gaming, making things and electronics. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, so bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.